Sirens were still echoing when I knelt in that alley. Her pink jacket lying in the dirt, torn, blood on the sleeve. My daughter was gone. The smell of oil, smoke, and rain filled the night like a funeral I wasn't ready for. They said it was random, but that alley looked too familiar, too planned. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. It started just after sunset. Harper's school recital had ended an hour late, and she insisted on walking ahead to the car, just 20 steps. I told her I'd catch up after talking to her teacher. Those 20 steps became the longest of my life. When I reached the street, the crowd had thinned. A motorbike revved near the alley behind the theater. At first, it didn't bother me, until the sound turned to screams. I ran. My legs carried me faster than thought. The alley smelled of gasoline and mud. Tires screeched. A headlight flicked off. By the time I turned the corner, all that remained was Harper's phone on the ground. Screen cracked, showing a missed call from me. The police came fast, but not fast enough. They treated it like a kidnapping for ransom. But the way that alley looked, the precision of it, no ordinary street gang worked that way. I'd seen setups like that overseas, during my years in the Rangers, planned, rehearsed, surgical hits. The chief asked if I had enemies. I said no, but my mind kept circling one thought. Someone knew my routine, knew where Harper would be, and how to make me fall apart. By midnight, the station buzzed with chatter and static. They promised leads, but their eyes told me they had none. I sat there, staring at Harper's jacket, holding it like it could still keep her warm. Every sound from outside felt like her voice calling me, begging to come home. At 2 a.m., I stepped out. The rain had stopped, but the world hadn't moved. My hands were steady, too steady. That silence before the storm, the kind soldiers recognized before the first shot. Back home, the house was dim. My wife, Quinn, sat on the couch with her phone clutched tight. No tears, no panic, just staring into nothing. I asked if anyone had called, if there was ransom, any message. She just whispered, "They'll bring her back." They? The word struck harder than a bullet. How could she say they like she already knew who they were? I turned away before anger got the better of me. The same instincts that kept me alive in deserts and war zones were waking again. Every glance, every tone, every silence felt like a clue. By dawn, the police had found Harper's backpack dumped near an industrial park 20 minutes from town. Inside were her drawings, her locket, and a bloodied paper napkin with an address scrawled in black ink. But that address wasn't random. It used to be our old family workshop, the one Quinn told me she sold years ago. The officer asked what it meant. I told him I didn't know. But inside, my hands were shaking, not from fear. From a memory, a photo I once saw in Quinn's drawer. A group of bikers, one of them her ex, wearing the same jacket I found near the alley. This wasn't a kidnapping. It was a message, and whoever sent it wanted me to remember who I used to be. The morning after Harper vanished, the air inside my home felt different, like every breath carried a weight I couldn't shake off. Coffee went cold on the table. The neighborhood looked the same, but everything underneath it had shifted. When you lose a child, time doesn't move. It just circles around guilt. The police had marked the alley, collected prints, interviewed witnesses, and then did what they always do: wait for something to happen. I wasn't built to wait. Somewhere out there, Harper was scared, maybe hurt, maybe calling my name in the dark. And all I could think about was the word my wife whispered. Quinn avoided my eyes that morning. Her phone never left her hand. When I asked if she'd eaten, she said she wasn't hungry. When I asked about the old workshop, she changed the subject to the police updates. Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed dry. There's a kind of silence that says more than any scream, the kind that hides secrets behind calm breath. By noon, the FBI joined the case because of my past record and the scale of the abduction. They were polite, formal, and careful with their tone. Everyone knew my history. They also knew I wasn't some desperate father begging for hope. I was the kind of man who could build hope out of nothing and make people fear losing it again. The agents traced a few camera feeds near the theater. The only usable frame showed a black bike with a Red Skull emblem on the tank and a broken backlight. That mark wasn't random. It belonged to a biker crew known years ago as Iron Sons. They'd gone silent after their leader got arrested for extortion and assault. His name stayed buried in police files until one of the agents read it aloud. Ryder. The sound of it twisted through my chest. I'd heard that name before, but not in my world. It was from a name Quinn once said when we talked about our pasts. A high school boyfriend, she said, died young. Seems the dead had a funny way of riding again. That evening, I called an old friend, Grant. He and I served in the 75th Ranger Regiment together. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Send me the names." By nightfall, I had locations, police links, and black market intel flowing through private channels. Sometimes money talks, other times fear does. Quinn grew restless watching me pace. She said I was losing my mind. I said nothing. Her hands trembled when she spoke, and she started keeping wine bottles upstairs instead of the kitchen. The gap between us widened faster than I could stop it. At some point, love becomes a shadow. It lingers, but you can't feel its warmth. 3 days after the abduction, an envelope appeared on our doorstep. No postage, no sender. Inside was a single phone photo, Harper sitting on the ground, ropes around her wrists, a gritty wall behind her. Her eyes were open, but there was a faint, terrified glaze in them. Written across the photo in red marker. "She's safe as long as you stay quiet." The handwriting, sharp, aggressive, but uneven. There was motor grease smudged on the edge. To anyone else, it looked like a threat. To me, it looked like a military-style distraction. Make them stay still while you move the pieces. That night I sat in Harper's room. Her bed still smelled like lavender and notebook paper. The sheriff's deputies had left all her drawings on the wall, sketches of mountain trails we hiked together, and one of me in uniform. The words under it said, "My hero." I wasn't thinking like one anymore. I couldn't. Heroes follow rules, fathers don't. I used the old encrypted laptop I hadn't touched in years, the one connected to a network of men who owed favors. Within hours, an image popped up, a burned biker jacket found near the outskirts, torn at the shoulder. The Red Skull emblem was half melted, but still clear. That jacket came from a machine shop near the industrial district, the same area where the paper from Harper's backpack had that address. I told the police about it. They logged it as evidence and promised to investigate. I didn't wait for anyone. Around midnight, I drove there alone. The road stretched past the city lights, into empty industrial fields. The air smelled of rust and rain. I parked outside a shut-down foundry, the kind that used to make steel beams. The gates were chained, but one of the side entrances hung open. Inside, I found oil drums, burnt cigarette cartons, and tire marks fresh in the dust. A chain-link cage stood at the back of the room. Marks on the concrete, drag lines. Whoever had been there left in a hurry. Then I noticed something small under one of the barrels, a silver charm bracelet, bent and dirty. I didn't need to guess whose it was. That bracelet was a birthday gift. Only family would have known the design, the engraving, the word Daddy's Star. In that moment, anger turned into something sharper, certainty. This wasn't random. Whoever took Harper had insider knowledge. Someone told them where she'd be, what she wore, even which path she used to walk to the car. When I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, blocked ID. I picked it up, but there was only static, then a faint voice whispering, "Don't trust her." It ended before I could trace it. The analysis team later said it came from a burner phone near the city's west end, the same district where Quinn's business charity held an office. The same place she said she hadn't visited in weeks. By dawn, the local news broke the abduction publicly, twisting the story into headlines about a billionaire's daughter lost to gang violence. Cameras filled our driveway, reporters shouting questions. Quinn played the grieving mother well, tear-streaked face, tight grip on her chest, perfect lines about love and hope. The performance was flawless, almost practiced. After they left, I went to our bedroom. While she showered, her phone buzzed. The message read, "He knows. Delete everything. R." I stared at it for a long time before locking the screen and walking out. The police couldn't find Harper, but they found a broken burner phone in a trash can near the old port. It had a photo of a biker gang hanging around an abandoned motel on the outskirts. I recognized the face of one of them, Logan, a former ranger gone rogue years ago. I called another old colleague, Victor, who worked in private intelligence. He confirmed the motel was used as a temporary chop shop. No one had been seen there for 2 days. Each piece was lining up, slowly forming a pattern. I could feel the trap tightening around whoever was behind it, and around me. Sometimes justice isn't in the courtroom. It hides in the shadows waiting for the right time to strike. That evening, Quinn sat beside me quietly, pretending to read. Her phone pinged again. This time, I caught a glimpse of the screen. Meet midnight. Same place. No trail. She didn't see me watching. I said I was heading out for air, then slid a GPS tracker into her car's bumper. Around 11:30 p.m., rain came again, steady, cold, and relentless. I followed her from a distance, lights off, down the old highway leading west. She turned toward the industrial park, the same place where Harper's bracelet was found. She parked behind a warehouse and stepped out, her face hidden under a hood. A man approached from the shadows, tall, wearing a leather jacket with a faded skull mark on the sleeve. My chest tightened. It wasn't some random biker. It was Ryder, very much alive, and very much meeting my wife in secret. They talked for a few minutes. I stayed hidden behind my car, watching from the dark. She handed him an envelope. He counted the cash, then leaned close, said something that made her flinch. When he left, she leaned against the wall for a long moment, shaking. Then she drove away fast. I walked up to where they stood, my flashlight cutting through the rain. On the ground, half buried in mud, was another photo of Harper, newer, clearer. Her hands weren't tied anymore. The message scrawled on it said, "She's awake. Keep quiet or watch her fade." Only one question echoed in my head as I stood under the downpour. Was Quinn protecting Harper or protecting them? As I drove home, the road blurred through raindrops and headlights. My reflection stared back from the windshield, not the billionaire or the father, but the man I used to be in combat zones. The calm before chaos. Quinn was asleep when I entered. I sat beside her, staring at the woman I once trusted with everything. Her phone was on the nightstand again, still unlocked. Dozens of deleted messages recently wiped, but software like mine doesn't forget. I restored them quietly. The last readable line before deletion said, "Don't worry. He'll never trace it. I'll make sure he blames the gang." That was enough. I turned off the lights, heart beating steady, not from panic, but from purpose. The kind of purpose that only returns when everything else has been taken away. The next move wouldn't belong to the cops. It would belong to me. And this time, I wasn't going to ask permission. Morning came without sunlight. The whole sky looked bruised, heavy with something that refused to break. I hadn't slept. Couldn't. The messages recovered from Quinn's phone wouldn't leave my head. The tone, the timing, the word blame. She moved quietly that morning, pretending nothing was wrong. The news still had Harper's face everywhere. She brewed coffee, scrolled through her phone, spoke softly like we were just another family having a quiet day. But there was something in her stillness, something that screamed control. I left before she could start asking where I was going. Didn't tell her, didn't need to. Grant and Victor were waiting behind a diner on the south edge of town. The smell of bacon and burnt oil drifted out from the kitchen vents, mixing with rain-soaked asphalt. Grant looked the same, solid, lean, unreadable. Victor, older now, wore glasses and an expression that said he'd seen too much and cared too little. Grant spread files over the trunk of my car. Ryder's crew operates from a southern route, he said. They run parts, weapons, and petty rackets. But there's chatter about a new benefactor funding them. His eyes lifted. Someone local. Someone rich. Victor tapped his pen against a photo. This symbol, the skull with red flame, used to be tagged around the old workshop where that bracelet showed up. We ran drone footage. Guess whose SUV was spotted there the day before the abduction? He didn't need to say the name. Quinn's silver car appeared on the screen, parked near the gate. It was like a part of me detached right then, heart quiet, mind clear, every instinct sliding into its old place. Betrayal doesn't just hurt, it reorganizes who you are. Grant asked what I wanted to do next. I told him I wanted Harper home. Everything else could burn after that. We started tracking Ryder's signal through burner phones tied to his name. The triangulation placed him within a 40-mile circle west, industrial land, half abandoned, half forgotten. Nobody lives there unless they're hiding something. By afternoon, I drove to the site where Harper's charm bracelet was found again. I wanted to see it in daylight. Sunlight hit the metal fences and made them shine like blades. The concrete walls around the foundry still smelled of burned fuel. I crouched near the same oil barrel and noticed something I'd missed before, a small scrape pattern in the dirt, repeating every few feet. Motorcycle kickstand marks, pointed east. Tracks led away through the mud, shallow but recent. I followed them down a narrow service road until they ended behind an old lumber warehouse. There, buried halfway in gravel, lay a piece of fabric, part of a biker's bandana, torn, stained with blood not older than 2 days. That blood would test out later as Harper's. I notified no one. The police would drown in paperwork. I wanted movement, not routine. At my home office, I started mapping coordinates. Every clue, every mark, every date Quinn had charity meetings or business trips. The overlap was too perfect. Every meeting matched one of the biker crew's recorded movements. That kind of precision doesn't come from coincidence. It comes from communication. Around sunset, I went through Quinn's hidden photos and downloads in her phone's cache. Buried inside her deleted media were a series of selfies from late-night drives, empty roads, headlights behind her, and, in one corner, a tattooed hand gripping her shoulder. The red skull again. She wasn't scared. She was there willingly. Maybe not at first. Maybe she thought it was harmless, but it turned into something darker. That was when another message came in, from a private number, sent to my own phone. She doesn't belong to your world anymore. Let her go, and you'll see your girl again. The sentence wasn't just a threat. It was a promise from someone arrogant enough to believe he had control. Grant traced the number instantly. It bounced through a chain of fake towers, ending near a junkyard west of River. He geared up before I could say no. Victor stayed at a distance, watching through satellite feed. We rolled out past midnight. 2 trucks, no plates, both armed with more intent than firepower. The junkyard loomed under weak floodlights, shadows of broken cars piled high. Rain-tapped metal roofs. Somewhere between those heaps, a radio hummed faintly, country music, off frequency. Grant moved ahead, scanning with night optics. Heat signatures glowed faint from a trailer near the back fence. Inside that trailer, we found a table stacked with papers, burner phones, and cigarette ash. On the wall hung a map of the county, red pins marking locations, including the alley where Harper was taken, the foundry, and one more pin far north labeled with a single letter, Q. Pinned beneath it was a torn piece of Harper's recital banner. Grant turned to me, eyes narrow. This isn't just a gang job, man. This is someone using them as tools. I didn't answer. My hand stayed on the map, tracing every line. Outside, the sound of an engine idled briefly, then faded. When I reached the gate, headlights vanished down the dirt road, too far to chase without giving position away. Victor's voice came through earpiece crackling. Got something. A transaction alert. Quinn's account just moved 50 grand to an unregistered ID in the same radius. She was paying them. When I returned home just before dawn, lights were off, curtains drawn. Quinn pretended to sleep, but her breathing was too controlled. People forget soldiers study breathing before battles. It's the easiest tell. I walked past her quietly, pretending I hadn't seen. In the study, her laptop blinked. I opened her email drafts, empty at first. But deeper in her sent folder were deleted correspondences restored by backup. Messages to Ryder, coded like business memos. The latest one read, "He's getting closer. End it soon. End it soon." That phrase rolled around inside my head like an echo that wouldn't fade. I drove back to the foundry that afternoon with Grant and Victor. We searched the far side this time and stumbled onto a locked maintenance shed. Bolt cutters handled the rest. Inside, scorched cement and burnt rope. On the ground, a child's sneaker, sole half melted. Grant kept his voice steady. "She was here. Recently." I knelt down. Dirt stuck under my nails, mixed with ash. Among the ashes, we found a small, burnt card sleeve, the kind you carry photos in. Inside, untouched by fire, was a picture of Quinn holding Harper at age 6. Across it written in marker, "Tell her goodbye." That was the first time my vision blurred, not from tears, but from pure, concentrated restraint. I took a long breath. Years of discipline pressed everything back down where it belonged. If I lost control now, I'd lose Harper for good. We left quietly, but as we reached the road, a black bike roared past from behind the trees. The rider wore a torn leather jacket, white stripe, red skull. His hand lifted, and something glinted before he tossed it toward our car. Grant swerved as the object clanged against the hood and rolled off. A burner phone. The screen flicked on automatically, video already playing. Harper alive, pale, shaking, sitting in a dim warehouse, whispering through tears, "Dad, please don't blame Mom." Victor's voice cut through over comms. "Signal trace point south. 40 miles. Warehouse near the river." Before we moved, another text flashed across the phone screen. "You want her? Bring Quinn." The trap was now wide open, and it had both our names written on it. Back home, Quinn was by the window, sipping wine again. I dropped the phone on the table. The video began automatically. For a brief second, guilt cracked through her expression. Then she whispered one word, barely a breath, "Ryder." With that, the wall between us shattered completely. And in the silence that followed, I understood one thing clearly. Harper wasn't just taken by strangers. She was taken by the echoes of her mother's past, and the price of that mistake was about to be paid in full. The room stayed silent long after Quinn whispered his name. Rain ticked against the window, and somewhere in the house a clock kept beating out the seconds like a countdown. She didn't try to lie again, not this time. Maybe she saw it in my eyes. Maybe she just ran out of strength to pretend. Her hands trembled around the wine glass. She looked smaller than I remembered, older too. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded like it had been waiting years to break. She said she met Ryder again months ago. He'd found her online, said he wanted to catch up, claimed he'd changed. Quinn told herself it was harmless. It started with messages, then coffee, then months of things she thought she could keep hidden. When she realized I was starting to suspect, she panicked. Ryder began asking about our life, what I was working on, if Harper still went to the same school. Quinn swore she never meant for it to go that far. But I could see what direction the story was already heading before she got there. Ryder had found out who I was, a rich, retired soldier with enough secrets to ruin his kind of people. He promised to scare me, make me remember how fragile life can be. Quinn thought he was bluffing, until the night Harper was taken. She stood there crying, saying she didn't know they'd actually hurt her, that it was just supposed to be a warning. That word, warning, echoed through my chest like a bomb detonating underwater. She said Ryder wanted money later, tens of thousands wired quietly, enough to keep her silence. The first payment already sent, which explained the bank transfers Victor picked up. I didn't raise my voice. Rage that loud only burns out too fast. Instead, I told her to sit down. Once she did, I called Grant and told him to get ready. We were going to find Harper tonight. Quinn begged to come. She said she needed to fix what she did. I looked at her, and the only reason I agreed was because they'd asked for her. I didn't believe in second chances anymore, but I believed in keeping my word to a child who called me hero. Harper deserved more than silence. Just after midnight, the three of us rolled out in two vehicles, Grant leading, me and Quinn behind. The rain had stopped, but mist hung low over the roads. The route led toward a riverside industrial site. Old warehouses lined the water like broken teeth. Victor tracked our target's signal live. The burner phone Ryder used kept pinging from a cluster of buildings at the edge. No movement detected outside, but warm signatures inside one of the larger warehouses. The plan was simple. Approach quietly, cut the power, get Harper, get out. I'd handled rescues before, but this one felt different, every heartbeat louder than the last. When we reached the fence line, I told Quinn to stay in the truck. Grant covered the rear. The moment we stepped inside, everything smelled of oil, rust, and burnt tires. Light flickered weakly from a few hanging bulbs. In the center of the vast space, a chair sat under a spotlight. Harper wasn't there. Instead, a phone vibrated on the seat. I picked it up. A message flashed. Look behind you. A clang echoed through the warehouse as the side doors slid shut. Motorcycle engines roared outside. At least 5 of them. Grant swore under his breath and took position by a pillar, rifle ready but steady. I moved toward the loading dock. Through the slats of the metal wall, I could see them, men in leather, silhouetted by their headlights. Ryder stood front and center, maskless now, older than the photo I remembered, but the same cold eyes. He held Harper by the arm. She looked dazed, her face streaked with dirt. She wasn't hurt badly, just terrified. Ryder smirked through the glass pane, separating us. He mouthed something. Bring her out. I turned to see Quinn standing at the end of the row, trembling. She'd ignored everything I said and followed us inside when I wasn't looking. Ryder's men revved their engines, waiting. Grant muttered through the comms that backup was 6 minutes out. 6 minutes might as well have been forever. I walked Quinn toward the door slowly. She whispered that she'd talk to him, that he would listen. She was wrong, but I let her believe it. Sometimes lies are easier than truth when there's no time left. The doors rolled open. Rain blew in from the river wind. Ryder stepped forward with Harper still caught in his grip. His grin widened when he saw Quinn. She called his name once, soft, broken. Ryder pushed Harper toward a nearby man and reached for Quinn's hand. For a heartbeat, she looked 20 years younger, back in the memory that ruined her. Then Grant shouted, and chaos shattered everything. Floodlights from the pier exploded on, blinding the bikers. Victor's drone above cut its engine, dropping a small flash grenade right between the bikes. White light burst. Engines roared. Shouts filled the night. I lunged through the smoke, grabbed Harper, and pulled her tight against me. Grant covered our exit, dropping 2 men before they even raised weapons. Quinn screamed somewhere behind us, her voice cutting through the noise. I turned long enough to see Ryder grab her and drag her toward the river edge. Grant yelled for me to move, get Harper out. I didn't listen. I handed Harper to him and went back. The river mist swallowed everything in gray haze. Ryder held Quinn at gunpoint near the dock, laughing like a man who'd already lost everything and wanted company in the fall. She kept saying she was sorry, telling him this was never supposed to happen, that she just wanted him to stop. For a second, I thought he might let her go, until he pulled her close enough to whisper something in her ear that made her flinch. Her hand moved, fast, desperate. She shoved him back toward the edge just as I reached them. The gun fired once, then twice. The echo bounced off the water and died. When the smoke cleared, Ryder was gone, lost beneath the current. Quinn collapsed into my arms, blood running down her shoulder from a graze. She kept shaking her head saying she didn't mean it, that she tried to stop him. Grant came running, Harper safe behind him. Sirens wailed in the distance, the sound of too late salvation. I carried Quinn to the truck. She kept asking if Harper was okay. Harper just stared, silent, tears cutting through the dirt on her face. When she finally saw her mother bleeding, she pressed closer to me and whispered, "Let's go home." We drove away as police lights washed the sky red and blue behind us. The warehouse burned slowly, a single column of smoke twisting into the night. Quinn survived, but something in her never came back. She barely spoke again after that night, sitting for hours just tracing invisible lines on the bandages around her arm. Harper stopped drawing. She stopped calling me hero. Sometimes children understand things we wish they wouldn't. I told the police Ryder drowned, though no body was found. They listed him as presumed dead. But deep down, I knew men like that don't disappear so easily. They crawl back when the world forgets to look. At home, when everything was quiet again, I found a single note slipped through our door. "This isn't over, Ranger." The letters were written in Quinn's handwriting. The days after the rescue passed in slow motion, like the world had lost its color. The house was quiet, almost sacred in its silence. Quinn stayed in the guest room, speaking only when necessary. Harper barely left her bed. Sometimes she'd wake in the middle of the night, gasping, eyes wide, hands trembling like she was still tied to that chair. I tried to rebuild something close to peace for her, a routine, simple meals, sunlight through windows. But peace doesn't grow on soil drenched in betrayal. Every sound, every flash of shadow felt like a memory crawling back. The police finished their reports within a week. No arrests, no leads. They found Ryder's shoe by the riverbank, but not his body. The gang disbanded overnight, members scattering under new names. The case went cold on paper, but not in my mind. Grant stopped by with updates from his network. A few of Ryder's men were seen crossing state lines with fake IDs. One was picked up and questioned. He said something that didn't make sense at first. "We were hired." It wasn't about the girl. Grant leaned across my desk and lowered his voice. He said somebody paid them to send a message, to scare you. Make you watch everything fall apart. I asked him who. The guy didn't know, but he left a clue. Payment accounts wired through an offshore broker under a code name. The Fox. My stomach turned when I remembered that was the name of Quinn's business consultant. A man she claimed handled all her charity transfers. Everything in me wanted to believe she wasn't still hiding something. But the evidence had its own voice now, and it was louder than loyalty. That night, I sat on the porch while rain streaked the windows again. Harper was sleeping upstairs, the sound of her breathing soft and uneven through the baby monitor I'd reinstalled. My phone buzzed once. Victor's message read, "Got a hit. The Fox withdrew 50 grand 2 days ago. Same account that paid the bikers." My pulse slowed. Sometimes calm meant clarity. People think revenge burns hot, but it doesn't. It's cold, organized, almost surgical. I drove to the office building Quinn had used for her charity foundation. It was empty now, the sign half taken down, dust covering the glass doors. Inside the director's office, folders lay scattered, drawers half open. On the desk, a nameplate reading Consultant, Colin Brooks, the Fox management firm. Behind the cabinets, hidden near the power outlet, was a flash drive taped to the wall. I pocketed it and left before anyone could see me. At home, while Quinn slept under the hum of night medication, I decrypted the drive. Files loaded one after another. Financial transfers, offshore payments, notes written by Colin. One email subject line froze me. "She's back in contact. Or wants proof." Attached was a photo, the first moment Quinn met Ryder again. They were sitting in a cafe, smiling. The timestamp was 2 months before Harper's abduction. Beneath it, a message from Colin to Ryder. "She'll fold easy. Money buys guilt." That line said everything. I forwarded the file to Grant and deleted the traces. The next day, I visited Colin's firm under a different name. The receptionist didn't even look up from her screen when she said he was out of town indefinitely. That meant gone, not missing. Gone because he already knew someone was coming. By noon, Victor called. He'd traced another payment through Colin's backup accounts, straight to a safe house used by Ryder's men. The address pointed to a small border town 2 hours north, near the mountains. I packed before I could talk myself out of it. Quinn woke as I zipped my bag. Her voice was tired. "You're leaving again?" I told her yes. She didn't ask why. Maybe because she already knew what answer she'd get. Harper came down the stairs quietly. She looked fragile but stronger than I expected. When I told her I had to check on some bad people, she nodded slowly, stepped forward, and hugged me for the first time since everything went wrong. She didn't say a word, but her grip said everything. Please come back. I drove long past dark, headlights cutting through endless forest roads. When I reached the edge of town, Grant was waiting near a gas station with 2 men from his private unit. He tossed me a headset. Quiet entry. No noise unless necessary. He had that old military steadiness I'd missed, like structure in chaos. The safe house sat behind a boarded funeral home. 2 guards smoked by the gate, unaware of the scope's glare on them. Within minutes, we slipped inside. Dust, broken furniture, old beer cans. In the back room, computers still running on low power. On the screen, a chatroom thread. Messages dated just 2 days ago. User 1, the job's done. The girl's safe. User 2, not safe. Not yet. He's still digging. User 1, she won't talk. User 2, doesn't matter. Orders remain. He goes down next. The username for User 2 read Fox. Grant copied the files while I scanned through a box of photos beside the desk. 20, maybe more. Everyone had me in it. Airport entries, car logs, every location I'd visited since the abduction. Someone had been tracking me long before this started. Whatever game this was, it wasn't over. It was only moving up the food chain. We left before dawn, the cold light crawling over the mountains. I could see my breath fog in front of me, as if the world was sighing. When I got home, Quinn was waiting on the porch, a robe around her shoulders. She didn't ask where I'd gone. She just looked out toward the street and said softly, "It doesn't matter how far you run. Some ghosts always follow." For a second, I thought she was talking about Ryder. But when she turned toward me, her eyes had something different, fear. Maybe she finally realized that the ghosts weren't chasing us anymore. We were walking straight back toward them. Later that day, I got a message with no sender ID. Just 3 words flashing on the screen. Check the judge. That name wasn't random. It meant Mason, my oldest ally from my Ranger days, the federal judge who'd built his career on cleaning up cases like this. Only, I hadn't spoken to him since before Harper vanished. In betrayal, patterns repeat themselves. Friends become suspects. Allies blur into enemies. And in that moment, staring at that message, I knew the next war wouldn't be fought with bullets. It would be fought with truth. Mason's office sat inside an old courthouse downtown, the kind where everything smelled of history, polish, dust, and paper thicker than truth itself. I hadn't seen him in months, not since Harper's recital. When he caught sight of me across the marble hall, his expression flickered, not surprise, not warmth, just weariness. He greeted me with his usual calm tone, asked how Harper was. The question felt sharp. I told him she was home, healing. What I didn't tell him was that I came with questions that could tear apart everything we once trusted. When the door closed behind us, the room felt smaller. Files lined his shelves, case names bleeding together. Mason had always been my anchor, a man of law, of order, and the only person who helped me rebuild after I left the Rangers. But something in his eyes shifted when I mentioned the Fox. His tone went careful, rehearsed. He said he'd never heard the name, but habits exposed him. The twitch near his jaw, the shuffle of a paper that didn't need to be moved, tiny tells of a man cornered in his own truth. I slid the flash drive across his desk. Your court signed the protective orders for one of these shell companies. Offshore for years ago. Same parent firm sending money to the Fox. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. His silence was the answer. After a long pause, Mason leaned back and let out a breath that sounded like surrender. He said the bikers weren't the real problem. They were hired muscle for clients whose money couldn't see daylight. His voice shook when he said one name I hadn't expected to hear again. Ryder used to run collections for a bigger network. Your wife's consultant wasn't just laundering money. He was buying silence. Political silence. I asked him who was paying. Mason's voice dropped. They have reached beyond what you think. I helped bury a few cases once. You weren't supposed to be part of it. But when your past crossed theirs again through Quinn, they decided to remind you who built your empire's ground. I didn't like riddles. I asked him straight if he was involved. He didn't answer. Before I could push further, a clerk knocked, breaking whatever thin string was holding the truth in place. Mason slipped the drive into his drawer, smiled faintly, and said to come back later. But his eyes screamed run. Outside, wind cut through the parking lot like steel. My phone buzzed, Grant again. We've got movement. Quinn's car just left town heading north. Harper's phone tracker attached with it. It didn't make sense. Harper was supposed to be at home asleep. I sped through red lights the whole way home. The driveway was empty. Upstairs, Harper's room was cold, her backpack gone. On her nightstand lay a folded note that said, I had to see her. Every shadow in that house felt alive again. Quinn was supposed to be too broken to drive far, yet she'd left hours earlier without a word. Grant caught up with me near the freeway. Traffic lights blurred into streaks. The signal from Harper's phone moved west, industrial zone again, where we'd rescued her once before. That realization nearly stopped my breath. It was the same cycle repeating, like we'd never escaped it. At the edge of the city, we spotted her mother's car, headlights dim, parked near an old motel swallowed in vines. Harper sat inside the passenger seat, head down, crying. Quinn stood outside the driver's door arguing with a man I couldn't see at first, until his voice cracked through the wind. Ryder. So he hadn't drowned. And she hadn't told me. The sound of him laughing was low, cruel. She came back for Mommy, he said, taunting. You raised a brave one. Grant motioned for backup position, silent hand gestures from our ranger days. I got out quietly, boots sinking in mud. Each step echoed the same pulse in my ears, steady, distant. Ryder turned before I reached them. The half-light exposed his scarred face, eyes wild. Harper saw me and froze, too afraid to react. Quinn's expression was something stranger, terror and guilt in equal halves. He shoved her toward me, gun in hand. You don't learn, do you, Ranger? This was never about the girl. Maybe not for him. But for me, it always would be. Before he could finish another word, headlights cut across the rain-soaked ground. 3 police cars slamming to a halt. Grant must have called them in from a secure line. Ryder cursed, grabbed Harper, and fired a warning shot. Officers ducked behind cars, shouting orders. But Harper bit his hand. It wasn't strength, it was desperation. The gun swung away for half a heartbeat. That heartbeat was enough. Grant tackled him, and I pulled Harper behind me. The gun went off again, metal ringing, another scream, and then silence. When the dust cleared, Ryder lay sprawled against the muddy gravel, breathing but broken. The police moved in to arrest him. I grabbed Harper and didn't look back. Hours later, at the hospital, Quinn sat with a bandage on her shoulder again, Ryder's bullet grazing the same spot as before. Life's cruel irony. She looked up at me once, eyes sunken. I never wanted it this far, she whispered. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Harper was safe this time, physically anyway. But something behind her silence felt heavier than before. She barely spoke to doctors, just kept asking one question again and again. Why'd Mom go back to him? There wasn't a clean answer. Just mistakes too deep to explain. Mason called me the next morning. Ryder was alive, barely, spilling names to federal agents. He'd already mentioned Colin, the Fox, even Quinn. The case was opening like a wound, but at least sunlight was finally hitting it. Mason said there'd be hearings and indictments, fallout reaching higher than I imagined. For the first time in weeks, the noise eased. Not peace, just quiet. Harper was home again, asleep for real this time. Her hand clutched mine while machines beeped steadily beside us. I watched her chest rise and fall and understood what revenge really costs. It takes your life twice, once when you start it and once when you finish. And still, part of me knew this wasn't the end. Because somewhere behind prison walls or government files, someone had written this story before it began. And they'd just lost their first player. The courthouse corridors echoed like cathedrals the day I walked in. Polished floors, cold light, people whispering as if truth had to sneak its way past security. I didn't belong here anymore. Not as a man of influence. Not as a father pushing papers across marble floors. I came for what Mason promised me. Answers. He stood near his courtroom, robe folded over one arm, eyes heavier than before. Behind him, reporters crowded, flashes slicing through the air. Ryder's arrest was already headline material, but nobody knew what really sat beneath it. Deals, names, payments, all of it was catching up now. When he finally led me into his office and locked the door, I could see the weight pulling his shoulders down. He said he'd received a federal brief that morning. Colin Brooks, the fox, had been found dead in his apartment. Overdose, staged clean, no fingerprints, no signs of struggle. This isn't coincidence, Mason said quietly. Someone's burying the board before we get to the king. I told him I wanted it all. The files, the accounts, the case folders with my name. He hesitated, then unlocked his drawer. Out came a thick manila folder stamped for internal review only. Inside were photos I'd never seen. Satellite maps, transaction sheets, and one stunning image. A photo of my company's logo printed beside an offshore builder's firm that had funded the Fox management. It felt like gravity had vanished for a second. My own company being used to move their money. And the signatures approving those transfers? Mine. Except the ink was forged, replicas of my authorization, flawless down to pressure marks from my old pen. All designed to frame me if things turned south. Mason said the forgery dated to nearly a year before any of this started. That meant someone had been planning this long before the night Harper vanished. They didn't just want revenge, they wanted erasure. I asked how deep it went, how far the circle ran. Mason rubbed his eyes and told me names I recognized. Small politicians, security contractors, lawyers who used to work under him. The network was old, part corruption, part loyalty. Ryder was only a messenger, he said softly. You were the warning. Quinn was the key. That sentence stayed with me long after I left. Quinn, the key. Back home. She sat at the kitchen table with her eyes tired from therapy medication, a cup of untouched tea in her hands. Harper was upstairs drawing again, filling the walls of her room with sketches of rivers and starry skies. I looked at Quinn and saw the woman I married, just older and emptied. For a second, I almost pitied her. Then she said, Mason called, didn't he? I asked how she knew. She said quietly, because if he told you everything, you should know I signed those transfers too. My pulse slowed again, the soldier's calm. She didn't flinch, didn't ask for forgiveness. She just explained. Ryder wasn't the first one to reach her. Colin had been helping her shift investments, with promises of high returns. When she learned about Ryder's debt, she used the accounts to launder the repayments, small amounts at first, then full contracts. She thought she could hide behind bureaucracy, but it became blackmail faster than she realized. The deeper she reached, the harder they tightened the rope. Until one night, a message came saying, bring the ranger to the river or lose everything. I asked her why she never told me. Her eyes filled but didn't break. Because you would have gone to war, she said. And we both would have lost her. Maybe she was right. Maybe not. Either way, choice was gone. Later that night, when Harper finally fell asleep, I went to my office and stared at the folder Mason gave me. Every photo, every forged document told a story carved by careful hands, hands close enough to mimic mine. Someone at the very top of that circle wanted me to take the fall for everything the Fox touched. The next morning, Mason called again. The feds were bringing in Ryder for testimony under protection. He warned me not to interfere. Let the courts handle it, he said. I told him the courts already failed once. I wasn't trusting them with my daughter's peace. That afternoon, Grant drove me to the secure holding facility where Ryder was kept. We told the guards we were there to verify intel from the Rangers Liaison Project. They didn't question it. Old badges still opened doors. When I stepped inside the interrogation room, Ryder looked up through bruises and bandages, smirk intact. I expected hatred. What I saw was amusement. Fancy seeing you again, he muttered, coughing a laugh. Guess the judge briefed you? How long were you working for them? I asked. He chuckled. Long enough to know your wife wasn't the only one they liked breaking. You think those court contracts of yours were clean? They've been washing blood through your accounts for years. You just didn't care to look. It took everything not to lunge across the table. Grant's hand on my shoulder kept me grounded. Ryder leaned closer. They call it leverage. Everyone's got something to lose. Yours was a family. They offered her safety for silence. She traded fear for loyalty. Then he said one thing I wasn't ready for. Your judge? Mason? He's next in line to take the fall. They built another file, one that pins it all on him. Guess they hate loose ends. He'd said enough. But as I turned to leave, Ryder spoke again, softer this time. You don't see how deep this goes. They don't care if I talk. They got what they wanted, a crack in you. You'll do the rest for them. That night, Mason called. His voice was broken. Agents raided his home, claiming they found offshore account trail files under his credentials. Exactly what Ryder warned. He kept repeating one thing. Someone's rewriting the story in real time. Then the line died. I sat in the dark for a long while. Outside, thunder crawled across the hills, slow and heavy. Harper woke from a nightmare again, calling for me. I held her till she stopped shaking. In her small voice, she whispered something new. When I was there, one of them said Mommy wasn't supposed to be there. They said they came for you. She fell asleep again before I could ask more. So that was it. I wasn't collateral. I was the mark. The kidnapping, the betrayal, the forgeries. It was all one long play to ruin me. Quinn was their instrument. Mason their cleanup. Ryder their delivery. Everything clicked then, every shadow forming a full shape. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was too small for something like this. This was betrayal evolving into war. By morning, I packed everything I needed. Hard drives, backups, evidence, unregistered phone. Grant was waiting outside. He asked, "You sure about this?" I nodded. We finished what they started. The next few weeks turned into quiet chaos. We tracked traces through shell networks, cross-linking every transfer originating from my companies. The deeper we went, the clearer it got. The operation had one headquarters, an old energy conglomerate front in D.C., holding accounts across 5 continents. We couldn't destroy it legally. It would vanish before the papers hit court. But we could expose it. Victor hacked the firm's internal server. Mason's notes, recorded years earlier, appeared, a confession of sorts. In his journal, he named 3 men who sat behind the money, codename Echelon. They ran their empire through fake corporate boards, running justice as theater while truth stayed locked underground. When I asked Mason why he wrote it all down, his answer came through voicemail recorded days before his arrest. Because someone needs to know the kind of hell loyalty builds. The night before the hearing, Quinn found me in the study again. She said she wanted to testify, to clean what was left of her name. Maybe she meant it this time. Part of me hoped she did. Harper listened from the stairs, tears streaking down her chin as she realized her mother was the reason we'd be in court again. Before sunrise, we drove to the courthouse, Grant ahead, Victor on standby. Mason's replacement, Judge Frazier, open session. Cameras outside flashed like storms. When Quinn took the stand, you could hear every heartbeat in that chamber. She told everything. The affair, the blackmail, the threats, the payments, the lies. She finished by looking straight at the camera and saying, "The first door I opened cost me my family. The last one, I opened to set them free." Outside, I watched the world shift. Networks aired the clips, headlines crawled, phones buzzed nonstop. The foundation of the quiet empire began to shake. Days slipped into weeks of investigations. Quinn was placed under protective custody. Mason cleared of charges after we handed the recordings to federal agents. Echelon vanished as expected, files wiped, members gone underground. But at least their mirrors shattered into the light. One evening, Harper drew another picture. Our family standing beside a river, sunlight on calm water. For the first time, her smile looked real again. She asked if we were safe now. I told her maybe not yet, but close. As I tucked her in, her small hand held mine tighter. You'll stop fighting soon, right? I nodded. Soon. But the truth? You don't stop fighting when you lose everything. You stop when silence finally feels heavier than justice. Outside, the wind moved through trees, dark clouds rolling west, another storm building somewhere beyond sight. I stared out across the horizon and knew this story wasn't just about one family. It was about how far people go trying to survive the lies they built. And as thunder broke far away, I whispered to the night, one more move left. Because sometimes survival isn't mercy, it's the slowest form of revenge. Part 8. The betrayer unmasked. 6 months passed, but every sunrise still carried echoes of the trial. The headlines may have faded, the broadcasters found new scandals, but behind closed doors, the ripples of that hearing never stopped spreading. The names Quinn had spoken in court, some whispered, some shouted, shook hands that used to pull the city's strings. Power that once looked permanent began to tremble. I sold half my companies, shut down the old networks that linked my business to their offshore chains. It didn't clean the past, but it stopped them from using my signature like a weapon again. Harper and I moved north, near a small lake surrounded by cedar trees. The kind of place where silence didn't feel dangerous anymore. Most days she spent by the shore with her sketchbook, drawing the world back together, one line at a time. Sometimes she'd ask when her mom could visit, and I'd tell her, when it's safe. The truth was I didn't know if that would ever happen. Quinn stayed under federal protection in an undisclosed townhouse somewhere inland. She sent letters through her lawyers, short notes about therapy, regret, hope. I never replied. It wasn't anger anymore. It was exhaustion. But peace, real peace, never lasts where ghosts still breathe. Grant called one evening with his voice low, serious. You need to listen to this. He sent me a recording, not words, just static at first, then a fragment of conversation caught through a bug they'd traced to an abandoned warehouse 2 states over. Among the chatter, one name repeated, Frazier. Judge Frazier, the man who replaced Mason, now under investigation for missing funds and tampered evidence. Grant said agents found the same forged signatures used to frame me, this time attached to his office. That meant the circle of echelon wasn't gone. It was rebuilding itself, like weeds after rain. 2 hours later, a letter arrived at my door. No stamp, no sender. Inside, only one line handwritten in black ink. You were supposed to stay quiet. The wrong woman paid the price. I stared at it for a long time, then locked it in my desk. The next few days blurred into quiet unease. Harper noticed before anyone else did. Why do you keep watching the trees at night? She asked. I told her I was just making sure the wind didn't carry anything away. But she was smarter than that. That week, a black SUV appeared near the dead end of our road. Different days, same spot. No license plates. The second night, I left the lights off and watched from the porch. Its engine hummed for almost 2 hours before it drove away. By morning, I called Grant. He said he'd send someone to check, told me to stay put, and hung up faster than he ever used to. I knew that tone. He was already moving in quiet patterns I wasn't supposed to see. The anxiety clawed at me all day. Even Harper noticed my silence. She tried to distract me with drawings, showing me one she'd finished, a mountain rising behind a lake, a woman in a white dress standing at the shore. It's Mom, she said softly. She looks better now. The detail hit me. How much it resembled Quinn, right down to the scar on her shoulder. I asked where she saw that. Harper shrugged. A lady visited yesterday. She said she knew you. She told me Mom's safe now. My stomach turned cold. That evening, I called the agents supervising Quinn's program. They swore no visitations, no releases, no movement in months. So who did Harper see? By the third night, the SUV returned. This time I went out armed, silently circling through the woods behind the property. The car door opened, and a silhouette stepped out. Tall, steady, not Ryder, not Quinn. When moonlight touched his face, it was someone I'd never expected. Judge Mason. But the lines on his face looked deeper, his eyes colder than memory. I walked forward slowly, gun down but ready. He raised both hands like he expected me to distrust him. I know what this looks like, he said quietly. But I had nowhere else to go. He explained that after Quinn's testimony, the Bureau pushed him aside. He'd started digging again on his own, tracing new aliases hidden within the remnants of Echelon's accounts. The trail didn't lead to DC or law enforcement. It led right back to the very agency assigned to protect Quinn. They turned her witness protection into a cage, Mason said. They don't want her free, Adrian. She knows too much. And now that you're clean, you're the only one who can make them stop wiping her out. Something between disbelief and fury hit me. If he was lying, it was a cruel bluff. But his voice didn't shake. He handed me a flash drive. Everything they didn't want seen. I copied it before they erased my credentials. They'll come for it soon, you or her. I took it, and before I could speak, headlights flared from the forest road behind him. Mason shouted, ducked instinctively, and gunfire split the night. The first shot hit the SUV windshield. I dragged him behind a tree, but the shooters were trained, methodical, and silent. Grant's team showed up minutes later, cutting through the attackers before they could close in. 3 down, 1 escaped into the darkness. A clean operation, too clean to be random. When it ended, Mason was bleeding from a shoulder wound, but alive. I told you they'd come, he rasped, gripping my wrist. Protect your daughter. Protect Quinn if you can. The rest, don't let them erase it again. Grant's men rushed him to a safe house, and I followed later with the flash drive sealed in my glove compartment. Inside the file were videos, bank ledgers, security memos, all detailing financial contracts tied directly to a private intelligence firm, the same firm managing federal witness programs. The organization had been laundering protective custody budgets into ghost accounts. They'd turned witness security into a black market of silence. Every person they protected was just another insurance policy. And Quinn's name was at the top of their list, tagged for liquidation. I sat there in the dark staring at the screen until numbers stopped being numbers. Then one folder caught my attention, timestamped 5 days ago. Inside was footage from a traffic camera near a dock. I froze as it played. Quinn, walking toward a boat, guarded by 2 men in suits. She wasn't under agency watch like they claimed. She was being moved. By dawn, I packed again. I couldn't risk taking Harper this time, so I left her under Grant's protection, her tiny suitcase packed with clothes and sketchbook. She didn't resist, just looked at me with a child's brutal honesty and said, "Bring her home for real this time." When I reached the coordinates in the video, the docks stretched along an inlet wrapped in fog. Boats rocked quietly, ropes creaking. The warehouse at the end of the pier glowed faint with light. I moved through leftover crates until a voice stopped me. "I told you one day you'd come back." Quinn. She stood there in a gray coat, looking half like herself, half like a ghost caught between forgiveness and despair. Behind her, 2 armed men lingered, not guards, handlers. "I didn't run, Adrian," she whispered. "They said they'd keep Harper safe if I stayed quiet." I told her about the drive, about the plans, the executions. Her knees weakened when she realized what that meant, that the same system protecting her had turned her into bait all over again. Before more words could come, shouts echoed from outside, Grant's team moving in. Panic rippled through the handlers. Shots rang above water, birds exploding from the trees. Quinn grabbed my arm, voice cracked. "If they can't have me, they'll go for her. You know that, right?" I did. We fought our way out through the back dock. One handler fell, the other fled into the night. I got Quinn into the truck, heart pounding harder than it should. The air felt thick with gunpowder and regret. As we drove, she looked at me once more and asked quietly, "Can you ever look at me again and not think of what I did?" The headlights caught her reflection on the window. She looked broken yet relieved, maybe because truth, ugly or not, had finally surfaced. I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Not yet. We drove until the forest swallowed the road and morning bled into fog. Grant's message came through crackled radio. We're clear. The safe house is secure. Harper's safe. For the first time in months, my breath didn't feel like glass in my throat. Quinn leaned back against the seat and finally slept. Outside, the sun began breaking through mist, burning away the night's ink. Maybe there's no undoing betrayal. Maybe some wounds just transform into reminders. But as I looked at her sleeping beside me and pictured Harper's small hands drawing mountains by the lake, I realized peace isn't something you wait for. You build it, one scar at a time. And for the first time, I believed maybe I could. For a few weeks, it actually felt like life might settle. The cabin by the lake took on the rhythm of an ordinary home. Mornings quiet, but not empty. Evenings filled with the sound of Harper laughing again. Even Quinn tried. She stayed mostly inside, reading, sketching with our daughter, avoiding the windows like a person learning to breathe after surfacing too fast. But normal never belonged to us for long. Peace doesn't erase memory. It only waits for the next phone call, the next headline. It came one afternoon while Harper was painting on the porch. Grant's name flashed on my phone, his voice sharp. We've got an issue. Mason's safe house was hit an hour ago. Files gone. One man dead. Mason missing. I didn't even answer, just looked at Quinn. She had already heard. Her face went pale, as if her body knew before her mind caught up. That night, I sat outside, staring at the lake. The wind cut cool across the water, carrying faint ripples of fog. I thought about all those years I taught soldiers to wait before they strike, to use silence like a weapon. I realized now that silence had turned into a cage. Maybe justice wasn't patience. Maybe it was motion. I went back inside, opened the locked chest under my bed. Old Ranger documents, retired armory permits, and the encrypted drives Victor had given me. One of them held details of the intelligence network still running in the background, the shadow layer calling itself Division 12. It linked right back to the same agency that had tried to erase Quinn. Grant called again before dawn. You sure, brother? Once we start this, there's no walking back. I told him there wasn't anything left to walk back to. The plan wasn't war. It was exposure. Division 12 fed on secrecy and silence. I would take both away. Victor's hacking rig was small enough to fit in a duffel. I drove south while the world slept, Quinn insisting on coming along despite every protest. If this ends, I want to see it end, she said softly. We reached the outskirts of D.C. by nightfall. From the ridge above Interstate 66, the city lights pulsed like a living machine. Victor met us at an abandoned FAA tower, his gray hair blending into the dawn haze. They're already on alert, he said. But we've got about 6 minutes once I breach their firewall. We moved fast. Inside the tower, Victor rerouted every antenna to broadcast the data packet across public networks, news agencies, encrypted platforms, even open government feeds. When he gave me the nod, I inserted the flash drive. Every file from Division 12's ledger poured out. Names, aliases, payments, cover-ups. Judges, agents, senators, every one of them tied to the same corruption that took my daughter's innocence. Somewhere in the feed, a name flickered, Frazier. Grant smirked. Thought so. Then the infrastructure alarm roared. They'd found us earlier than expected. Headlights flared across the access road. Black SUVs closing fast. Victor shouted, 5 seconds, just as bullets shredded the outer walls. Glass shattered, dust filled the air. Quinn crouched beside me, covering her head. I held her hand without thinking. It was instinct, not forgiveness. The upload reached 100%. Victor yanked the drive free and smashed the terminal. Outside, we made for the secondary exit through the old hangar. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it began, too suddenly. Grant peeked around the corner. One SUV remained, engine idling, door open. No driver. Only a phone on the seat, screen glowing with a single phrase. remember the river. I felt the old chill return. Ryder's voice, his tone, woven back into my mind. Could he still be alive? No. I saw him go down myself. But the message was deliberate, a remnant of that same threat reborn through different mouths. By the time we hit the main road, sirens wailed all over the city. The data leak had gone viral. My phone blew up with messages, journalists, investigators, old allies, even enemies who suddenly wanted to talk. Division 12 secrets weren't theirs anymore. We reached a safe point on the ridge where city lights met horizon. Victor checked his device, smiling faintly. It worked, he said. Everything's out. They can't hide now. Grant leaned against the truck, catching his breath. So what now? I looked at the skyline, Washington glowing like some broken crown. Now we see if truth still means anything. Back at the cabin days later, it finally seemed like the battle might have ended. Federal raids swept through the Capitol, freezing accounts, indicting officials. Reports called it the silent collapse. For the first time, the powerful were the ones begging for light. Yet victory never felt like triumph. It just felt quiet. At night, Harper sometimes slept by the fireplace with Quinn reading beside her. I'd catch snippets of laughter, soft, uncertain, slowly healing. Those moments were the closest I'd come to peace since the alley. One evening, I found Harper by the lake again, sketching under orange sunset. She looked up and asked, "Is it really over?" I told her yes, though part of me didn't believe it. Later, when I walked back into the house, Quinn stood by the stove, hair tied back like before any of this began. She looked at me for a long time before saying, "I used to think forgiveness was the end of something. Now I think it's just the start." I nodded. Maybe she was right. Because every story of revenge eventually faces a quieter truth. It isn't about destruction, it's about release. Weeks passed. The government hearings grew broader. Mason reappeared to testify, alive but scarred. He named names I hadn't even seen in the files. Grant's company received commendations for exposing corruption. Victor disappeared into another continent like he always promised. And me? I stayed by the lake, built a small dock with my own hands, waited for the world to forget my name again. Then one morning, a letter arrived. No return mark, same handwriting from months ago. My pulse spiked as I tore it open. Inside, one sentence spread across the page in uneven ink. "You stole our silence. We'll take your peace." I walked outside, the note crumpled in my fist, and stared across the calm water where Harper and Quinn sat beside the dock feeding birds. The air was still, picture perfect, like life finally wanted to behave. I slipped the note into my coat pocket and smiled anyway. Because for the first time, I understood that threats only matter if you choose fear over living. They could come again, but they'd find a man who already lost everything worth dying for, and found something else worth protecting. I made a vow that night, quiet but final. No more wars, no more justice through noise. Just legacy. Harper's art would hang on walls that never knew darkness again. My story would end not with a gun or fire, but with calm. The world outside could fight itself to ash. Mine would stay whole. The letter never left my coat pocket. I carried it for weeks, folding and refolding it until ink faded into the creases. The words, "You stole our silence. We'll take your peace." Felt less like a threat now, more like a prophecy. Because peace never lasts when too many people have paid for it. The federal case against Quinn opened in mid-August, under higher security than any trial I'd ever seen. Cameras swarmed the steps. Officials lined the benches. Reporters craved the next twist to print beneath catchy headlines. To them, she was the face of scandal. To me, she was still just the woman who once filled our daughter's lunchbox with handwritten notes. Harper and I sat in the back row. She wore the same lavender scarf Quinn had bought for her last birthday. The one she insisted was her armor. I told her she didn't have to come, but she shook her head. She needs to see I'm not scared anymore. When Quinn walked in, heads turned. The whiteness of her suit made her look almost weightless. No makeup, no jewelry, just the mark of time around her eyes. Our hearts had traveled different years since the night of the alley. But watching her take that witness chair, I couldn't help remembering the woman I once promised to protect. The prosecution painted her as the willing link between corrupted agents and contract crime syndicates. They had evidence, the transfers, the messages, even her recorded admissions. Mason's testimony helped, clarifying how she'd been used as both pawn and partner. When her turn came to speak, she didn't look at the crowd or the cameras, only at Harper. Her voice carried softly but steady. I did everything they said. I made choices I thought were mine. But the truth is, I just kept obeying fear. Then she said something that silenced even the reporters. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just ask that my daughter never inherits my cowardice. The judge's final ruling brought what everyone expected: 5 years under lenient custody with cooperative parole for federal cooperation. When the gavel struck, Quinn's lips trembled into something between relief and collapse. Harper sat beside me, quiet until the bailiff led her mother past the rail. Then she stood and hugged her, quick, fierce, unguarded. People around us gasped like they'd witnessed an act of impossible grace. Quinn whispered through her tears, "You saved me, not the other way around." That moment carved itself into me deeper than any wound I'd ever carried. After the verdict, cameras crowded me outside. Questions about morality, forgiveness, the hero billionaire. I didn't answer. Instead, I told them one line that ended the noise. Justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Weeks turned into early autumn. The wind shifted colder over the lake. Harper's laughter returned, less fragile this time. We built a small greenhouse together. Her idea, she said plants were quiet proof that life forgives weather. Every evening we sat inside, lights spilling gold across glass, peace finally taking form in something alive. Grant visited once. Victor sent word from overseas that the remnants of Division 12 were still being hunted. And Mason, he wrote a letter of resignation to Congress, saying the law should never wear chains made of its own pride. For a while, it looked like we'd made it to the end. Until one morning, halfway through September, the lake shuddered under rotor blades. Not police. Black military-type helicopters hovering too close, then veering away. Mail arrived that afternoon. A small brown envelope slipped under the door. No name, no return address. Inside was a photograph. Our cabin from across the water, dated yesterday. And below it, scrawled in that same uneven ink, legacy denied. Grant traced it to no source. Victor thought it was a clever bluff, someone testing fear again. I wanted to believe that too. But the difference between past and future is that the second always borrows from the first. That night I sat on the dock, watching reflections drift across the lake while Harper slept and Quinn's ghost lingered in every quiet corner. The stars overhead didn't mirror peace, they mirrored persistence. I realized then what my father once told me when I was still a soldier, that some wars don't end when enemies fall. They end when we choose not to raise the weapon again. So I folded the photograph, placed it in a metal box with the faded letter, and dropped it into the deepest part of the lake. Let the water keep what the past wanted. I went back inside, turned off every light but one, and stood in Harper's doorway. She slept curled into her blanket, her mother's scarf wrapped around her wrist. Outside, thunder rolled far away, but softer now, as if even the storm had grown tired. Maybe that was the point all along. Not victory, not punishment, but quiet. The kind you earn after losing everything and still choosing to live. Tomorrow would come, with its headlines, its noise, its fragile promises. But tonight, for however long it lasted, the house finally felt like home again. And that meant the fight was over. The night after the storm, the lake looked calmer than it had in months. The surface lay flat and silver, catching the glow of dying stars. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from exhaustion finally giving way to release. Harper sat by the dock, her feet just brushing the surface, sketchbook balanced on her knees. She was drawing the water again, the reflection of the mountains behind us. When I looked closer, I saw 3 figures in the sketch: a man, a woman, and a small girl, all holding hands beneath a wide sky. She noticed me looking and smiled softly. "It's not a goodbye picture," she said. "It's a beginning one." Behind us, the cabin lights dimmed as morning started to take shape. The air smelled of pine and rain-soaked wood. Quinn had called from her rehabilitation center the night before. Her therapy was working, and she would be released early for good behavior. Her voice sounded steadier than it had in years, not guilty, not broken, just hopeful. Maybe that was enough. I told Harper her mother might visit soon. She nodded without fear this time. "I think she deserves sunlight again," she said. We stayed there until the first light cracked across the horizon. And in that fragile stillness, I finally understood what all of this had cost and what it had given. Revenge had burned through every corner of my life. But somehow, in all that smoke, I found something worth keeping. Not justice, not control, just the quiet truth that love, once shattered, can still be rebuilt. Not perfect, but stronger in its scars. When we packed to leave the lake for good, Harper tucked her drawings into a single folder and asked if I was ready to live normal again. I smiled and said, maybe we were never meant to be normal, just whole. As we drove down the dirt road, the last look at the water showed our reflections fading into the morning mist, the final memory closing itself. The past was buried under that lake now, sealed with the truth that no one could erase again. Before we left, Harper turned to me and asked quietly, "Dad, do you think the people who hurt us ever feel what we felt?" I paused, the engine humming beneath us, the weight of years between breaths. "Maybe," I said, "and if they don't, that's their punishment." And now, as I tell this story to you, the ones listening, the ones who sat through every heartbreak, twist, and silent prayer, I have just one question for you. If forgiveness came knocking at your door after all the pain, would you open it or let it wait outside? Tell me in the comments. I really want to hear you. And one more thing. If you've been here from the first part, if you felt every heartbeat of this story, show it some love. Tap that like button gently. Hit subscribe if you want to travel with me through more human, raw, painful, and healing stories. Because this isn't the end, it's just a promise. We'll meet again soon, in another story, another storm, another fight that ends with peace. Till then, take care of yourselves, and remember, silence can hurt, but it can also heal.